make sure. Yeah. Okay. So this week we have been talking about the various colonies that popped up throughout the Americas. You guys remember last week we talked about the Native Americans and the different regions that they had. And we kind of touched on the explorers. We didn't get to touch as much on the explorers as I really would have liked to, just simply because it's harder to do online, all of the activities that I have for that. And it's the struggle that we're living with right now. But after Christopher Columbus landed in what's today technically the Dominican Republic, after he landed there, they had and discovered the natives there and discovered gold there. Spain, Portugal, and France really started getting into colonizing North and South America. The Spanish came over and took over what's today Mexico, Central America, and a large portion of South America, which we talked about when we talked about the Aztecs and the Incas. But other than that, you had really four big countries that were present in North and South America. You did have the Portuguese come over to Brazil, but they really just took over that one area. They didn't see much success otherwise. You see the French coming in and taking over the Louisiana territory, the Ohio River Valley, which is about right in here. You see the English coming in and taking over Canada and the 13 colonies area. The Dutch are in the same area. And then you see Spain taking over Florida and the Caribbean. But all of that is in this video right here. So I went through the whole PowerPoint for you guys, which is attached right here. And then you have the compare and contrast document, which I explain in this video. These two videos are just extras that explain a little bit more about exploration and the natives. And this one is about the natives and the Spaniards, but it's going to talk a little bit about the English and the French as well. Usually just passing mention, but it'll go over a few things. So those are for you guys for your benefit, and they're just extra. So I would watch them. You don't have to watch them though. All right, so today, Thursday, Friday folder. Okay, so here is the page for the English colonies. Now, on the PowerPoint that is covered in the Tuesday, Wednesday folder, it doesn't really mention the English colonies outside of talking about the Dutch just a little bit. To finish up the compare and contrast, you're going to need to check out this and pay attention to what we're going to talk about today, because that's going to be where you see a lot of what the English were able to do. Oh, let me let people in. Okay, so the English came over quite a bit later than everybody else. I think it was, I don't think they got started until 1619 is when they started colonizing.
I'm at school, so I'm on my phone. I'm getting the new computer.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Is this Wyatt's talk, or is it Wyatt or Craig? Am I saying your name even right?
No, it's Hayden.
It's Hayden. Okay, I can't see you, Hayden.
Yeah, like M through Z or something like that is getting the computers like right now.
Oh, cool. Well, hey, Hayden.
Okay.
Glad to see you.
Yeah.
Let me minimize that. Well, if you guys are out getting your computers, then I don't think they'll let you drop by, but if you wanted to, 1187, that's where we're at right now. But okay, back to this real fast. So the 13 English colonies, these are the ones that are going to start up the United States. You have the Dutch who come over really and start New York, Pennsylvania, the New Hampshire areas. And they're going to influence these areas quite a bit, but most, by the time that we reach the 1700s, is the English who have really come in and dominated this area. So there are three different regions. There are the New England colonies, the middle colonies, and the southern colonies. We're going to break this down into these three dimensions because they're going to be important from this point until we get to the Civil War. Because the lines that are drawn here during this time period and in these 13 colonies are going to extend, and we're going to follow that all the way down to the Civil War. So let me see. Okay. I'm going to pull, not this one, but this one. All right, these are the worksheets you guys are going to be doing. I think they're super easy. There's not a lot to them. It should be a lot of common sense questions. They shouldn't be very difficult whatsoever. So like the map questions here, why do you think they didn't originally settle on the west coast of the United States over here near the Pacific Ocean? Well, because England is here and here's the east coast. So things like that. And they should be very simple, and all of the info that you could possibly need will be in these the documents. All right, let me scroll down to keep on going. Here we go. Okay, so the New England colonies, the geography and the climate, these are important because they're going to be how we end up determining who goes where, basically. So New England colonies, which are those northernmost colonies, let me scroll back up. These right here, New Hampshire, Maine, Massachusetts, some of Vermont, but Vermont tends to be considered more of a middle colony. That's kind of one of those funky ones. Rhode Island and Connecticut, those are your New England colonies. These areas are mountainous. They have thick, large trees, a lot of rivers, very rocky soil. They have long winters and they have short summers, which are mild. So if you're thinking about that, that's not really conducive to farming, right? What kind of industries could pop up in these areas? What do you guys think? You can chat or vocally say it. Look back over here. So if you have mountainous regions, you have a lot of trees, and you have rivers, what do you guys think? What kind of businesses could pop up in that area? All right, so it's not going to be farming, right? Because if you hunting animals, very good. Yes, hunting animals is going to be huge. They're going to have a huge fur trade up in the New England colonies, especially with the French and the Native Americans. Another big thing that they're going to do is they're going to sell a lot of timber. They're going to have a lot of lumber industry, but they're also going to have a shipping industry in the north. Okay, longer winters and short summers means they don't farm very much. Now, if you go up to Maine, New Hampshire, especially more like Connecticut, they do have small farms, but those farms aren't. It's what's called substantive farming, and it means that they only grow what they need for themselves. So if you think about like the gigantic fields that you see coming up 65 or down 565, the two big interstates, those gigantic fields are more cash crops. Those are what we're going to see down in the South. If you think about like your grandma, your grandpa, maybe your family farm, that's what they had up here. It was just what the people who had the farm needed. And you're going to see that in New York, in the middle colonies, as well as the New England colonies. People are going to come to the New England colonies for freedoms. There's going to be a lot of religious persecution that are going to bring people over, and when they settle right in here. We'll talk more about each of the individual colonies next week. We're going to take a deep dive into that. But for now, all you need to know is people coming into these areas came for religious freedoms, and then they ended up starting more lumber industries and shipping industries. There's a lot of fishing, a lot of hunting, and a lot of fur trade. All right, if we get to the middle colonies, which are New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, and like I said, Vermont's kind of one of those in between colonies. So these are going to be your middle colonies. A lot of families are going to come to these areas, but this is the area that gets industrialized. When we start talking about the Industrial Revolution at the end of the semester, this is where you see that most significantly. So New York and Pennsylvania especially are going to have huge industries that pop up. They're going to start factories and all of that. But they came here for a little bit of larger farming, and they came for the industry. So families tended to be up in New England colonies. You had like younger men and women who would come into the middle colonies as well. In that area, the geography, it's somewhat mountainous. It's marshy swampland, flat lands. They did have rivers and lakes. They do have fertile soil. They have longer days than what you have in New England, plenty of sunshine and rain, moderate temperatures in the spring and the summer, and then they have humid summers as well. So if you think about going up to New York, you think, generally speaking, when you think of New York, you think of New York City. And you think of the like gigantic spanning urban centers. But if you go anywhere else in New York besides the coastline, there's a lot more farming. They have tree farms. They have, I don't know why, I do know why tree farms popped to mind first, because we have somebody that we buy maple syrup from New York who grows trees for that. But just smaller farms, but they grow wheats and grains, oats, not necessarily what you would think of as cash crops, but they do have a lot more farming that gets sold into, that gets traded over towards England in the middle colonies. All right, final ones we talk about, southern colonies. That's where we live. Obviously, you've got Georgia, South and North Carolina over here, so we think quite often about these because they're our neighbors. But southern colonies, kind of mountainous, very lush valleys. Think about Tennessee Valley, which is where we're at right here. A lot of rivers, a lot of plains, rolling hills, and extremely fertile soil. We have humid spring and summers, milder winters, and the warmest temperatures of the 3 colonial regions. So we know that people come here specifically for farming. This is where you're going to see most of your huge plantations. A lot of men came over to make money quickly with cash crops. You see the growth of tobacco, cotton, sugarcane. Sugarcane tends to be more in South Carolina and Georgia because the temperature is a bit better for that there. And this is where we're going to see the bulk of slavery in the new colonies come into. So if you, well, I don't have my other map. If you look down at the map on your Tuesday, Wednesday page, South America, along the coast where Brazil is, along the coast of Central America and Mexico, you had a lot of slavery in those areas as well because you grew a lot of sugar cane and a lot of cocoa down in those areas. And you had a lot of slavery going into those areas as well. But these are the colonies where it's most associated with. In the New England colonies, you had too many families, too many people who were religiously inclined to agree to slavery. So a lot of your abolitionist movements are going to start in the New England colonies. Your middle colonies are going to be a bit too focused on industrializing, and eventually they're going to be a little bit too concentrated on creating a new country. Because in New York and Pennsylvania and then Massachusetts are going to be the big 3 areas where we see the revolution kickstart. So down in this area, in the southern colonies, that's where you see a lot of farming, a lot of slavery. You see those gigantic plantations like what we think of when you think about like Gone with the Wind, or what is the movie? With what's his face, the 12 Years a Slave, that one, the gigantic big plantations, that's these areas. And that's where the antebellum South and all of this is going to kick in, which we'll get to as we move further and further. But the reason that this is important, okay, so what we're going to follow from pretty much this point onward, there is this trend within the colonies, and it's going to be a trend within each of the states, and it's going to blow up when we get to the Civil War. So what you have is you see these colonies and people living in these colonies identified with their colonial region first. So if you lived in Virginia, you were a Virginian first and foremost. You identified with your state before you even identified with your country of England. Once we become the United States and we break away from England, they still identified heavily with their state first, over the United States. And then there's going to be this kind of clash between ideals of states and how much rights the state should have and how much federal government power should have. And that's going to come, all of that is going to come to a head and going to be catalyzed by the slavery issue that's going to blow up into the Civil War. But what you end up with is these southern colonies that have an agricultural base and end up having way more power than you would ever believe they should have. They're going to be the powerhouse of these 13 colonies going into the Revolutionary War and then going into the Civil War. So what they say and what they're going to have a larger say in how the Constitution is written and how much rights certain people have. And since their economy is based on slavery, it's going to become a huge, huge issue for them. So that's going to lead us into the Civil War and all of that. And we'll touch on that constantly throughout this. But I do want to go ahead and highlight that as an issue, because there's and this is a tangent, but it's an important tangent. There's a tendency today to look back at history from where we're sitting in 2020. And when we look back at history from 2020, things seem a little bit different from how they actually were back in the 16 and 1700s. So we've got to look at history and the progression of history from the point when it was written and when it was happening. If you think about today, when we think back on the Civil War, you always think about the fact that the North was industrialized and the South was this agricultural hotspot. And you would have a tendency to think that the North had all of the advantages. Well, going into the Civil War, the South had all of the advantages. The South was in all, like if you were to look at it textbook, the South should have won the Civil War. They had better generals, they had more money, but their problem was that they didn't have a cohesive government. And that's what ended up being the crippling factor for it. So we don't think about that when we think of the Civil War, because we think about the Civil War from today. And we think about how being industrialized and having manufacturers and having factories that could quickly produce things, we think about that being a benefit, when at the time it wasn't the benefit that it is today, if that makes sense. So that it's so important for us to go ahead and start drawing these lines and realizing where the tensions for everything that's going to come from this point onward. And this is where they start. It's this division between colonies, this division between what's going to go on in the New England colonies, what's going to go on in the middle colonies, and what's going to go on in the southern colonies. So this is something very, very important. I really can't stress that enough, that you have to understand before, because it's a building block to get us to the Civil War. And eventually when you get into 11th grade, it'll be building blocks to get us into all of the issues we're going to face in both the World Wars and the Korean Vietnam War. And it still has, we're still seeing some of the effects of this today. So that is that. Your assignments for this week, really, but for today, are to do these worksheets over here. Just go through and answer each of these questions. It's not a lot. Don't overthink it, would be my advice. Because there is a tendency to overthink things, and don't freak out about it. If you do feel like you're freaking out about it, send me a message through Schoology and I will help you out as best as I possibly can. And then you have this 13 colonies map. What I want you guys to do for this is to label each of them. So like Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, New York, Massachusetts, and Connecticut and Rhode Island. And just kind of go through, label those, and then color them in for which section they are. So if it is a southern colony, like these down here, you would color it red. If it's a middle colony, you can color it yellow, and a New England colony, color it blue. To be honest, I use these colors because they are the most basic colors that pretty much everybody has somewhere in their house. If you would like to color them a different color, there is a whole rainbow of possibilities. Please feel free to do that. Just make sure you tell me which colonies you colored which color. So give me a key like this up here, and you can color them whatever color you want. Or if you want to follow that, go ahead and follow that as well. You guys have your quiz up. It is open notes because there's no way in the world I can stop you from using your notes or your phone or something like that. So early American civilizations, take advantage of this while you can, because this will probably be your only open notes quiz. So definitely take advantage of that. It's 26, 27 questions, I think. And it's not timed, so take your time on it, do your best. And that's all. It's due on September the 14th. And I don't think this is one where I can be lenient on your due date. So do this either today or tomorrow. Don't be, 11:30 trying to scrounge and take this quiz on Monday evening. All right. Other than that, that is everything to do. I'm going to stop the share for the page. If you guys have any questions, now is the time to ask them. And if you don't have any questions, you guys are completely and totally free to go.
I have a question.
Do you have a question? Is it Esther? Yeah, it is Esther.
Yeah.
Hey,
Okay, so that there's a thing in my stuff, and it says challenge 1. What is that?
oh, okay. So let me share it with you real fast. This is your let me pull it up. I'm sorry. Yeah. So challenges are things we're going to do throughout the semester, and it's just kind of like it doesn't have any effect on your grade whatsoever. It's only for house points. So if you want to gain house points for your house so that you guys will win either the overall points or the points for your block, your house, or your house within your block. Yeah, there's 3 different things you can do. If you want to get house points, this is where you can get house points at, basically. This one is all you have to do is you're posting like a selfie on your group. But like I said, no impact on your grade whatsoever. So don't freak out about that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Any other questions? All right, well, you guys are free to go. Y'all have a good weekend.
Bye, Miss Bishop. Thank you.
Bye, Esther. Have a good day.
You too.
Thank you.